You are listening to the On Purpose Podcast, your guide to living a more purposeful life. What's up, everybody? Welcome to this week's edition of the On Purpose Podcast, where you know what it is. It's our privilege to show up with you each and every week to help you think, react, move, maybe even just reflect a little differently. And I can't tell you what it means to us to be here with you and to have this space in your life, and we don't take that lightly. So I want to thank you for being here and being part of our movement and helping us reach our goal to be the most impactful podcast in the world. So this week I'm excited to bring you a guest who's a man on a mission to help high-performing men win where it matters most, which is at home. Mitchell Osmond, founder of Dad Nation, turned personal rock bottom into a movement that's redefining fatherhood, connection, and legacy. If you've ever felt powerful in your career but disconnected in your relationships, this conversation is for you. I'm excited to delve into this topic with him because I think so many of us, men and women, lose ourselves in our careers, lose ourselves in our identity of what we do and not who we are. So I'm excited to see where we go with this conversation and see what kind of impact it can make for you all. So once you're done, let us know what you think about this, and let's get started with this week's conversation with Mitchell Osmond. Looking for the perfect escape? Step off the grid and into the wild heart of Old Florida at the Hideaway, a nature-based family campground tucked along the legendary Suwannee River just an hour west of Gainesville. Whether you roll in with an RV or pitch a tent beneath the canopy, the Hideaway offers 1,500 feet of boardwalk through untouched hammock, riverside trails to secret picnic spots, fishing holes, local springs, and a kind of peace that lingers long after you leave. Reconnect, recharge, remember what matters. Visit thehideawayfl.com to plan your stay. Mitchell, my newest friend, welcome to the On Purpose Podcast. It's an honor to have you here today, my friend.
Thank you, Jerrod. I'm really excited to be here and looking forward to having this conversation with you, brother.
Dude, I want to thank you for what you're doing, and I know we'll get into it for our audience specifically, but just having the courage to share where you've been, where you're going, and to believe that anything's possible takes a lot of courage, right? It takes a lot of, man, if I put this out there, is anybody going to resonate with this? Is anybody going to find it useful? So I want to thank you for taking the leap and believing in you and your story so that we all can learn and grow with you.
Yeah, you're welcome, man. It's anyone who's been on a journey like this knows it's terrifying, it's exciting. You doubt yourself, you celebrate, I mean, it's full of all kinds of highs and lows. But all in all, man, I'm glad I went on the journey, and I'm just humbled and I'm grateful that I can use the trash and the treasure from my life to help other men succeed. So.
And I love that. I love that analogy, trash and treasure. And I just had an episode not too long ago where we talked about mud on our boots, right? And like how we always leave our boots outside the house so the mud doesn't ever get in. But sometimes you got to look at the mud in your life and what is it trying to teach you. And I like your analogy too, right? The trash and the treasure, because we're all on a journey. If you reach a destination in life, like I don't know what that would look like. That maybe the end of life.
Well, there is no end, right? That's why I love, I believe Simon Sinek's book, The Infinite Game, and it's like the only point of this game is to keep playing. You don't get out, right? And so that's not the point. And so this is, which we can get into a little later, but the trap that we fall into as men, right, is thinking that one day we're gonna just relax and it'll all make sense and we'll be at peace.
Yeah, no, that is so. And honestly, I'll tell you in my own personal journey, that's something I've worked hard on, is realizing that like every step of the process is its own unique opportunity, right? And it's not about where I end up, but where I'm at right now. But
and I believe that's we get caught up in that trap, right? Of striving and striving and striving, and then all of a sudden we get to the future and we're exhausted and we don't know what happened because in each moment in the present we were so preoccupied, and then we get to a situation in our life where we give everything to get back to relive it and it's over, right? But and when we were in it, we were so busy focused on the future. So yeah, it's a tough one, man.
It is, and I find it particularly hard on the men, right? And the way we were raised, at least, my generation, you're probably a little younger than me, but we were raised that work was our value. What we contributed to the family was our worth. And yeah, so many men lose themselves in that identity that they get to that destination, which could be retirement or whatever. They don't even recognize the life they've had. There's a cool poem out there. I'll have to send it to you. Matthew Arnold wrote a poem in like 1857 called "The Buried Life," and literally that's what he's talking about on his deathbed: is where did my life go? Where did my life come, and where did it go? Because he made it, but he didn't even recognize his life looking back. It wasn't what he wanted to do. It wasn't his fulfilling life. He was buried in just the demands of the day, and that's in the 1800s, and we've only added more demands to our day now, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's so. For example, one of the things that I do with my clients, one of the first exercises we do is a eulogy writing exercise, where the men, take stock of their life. And it sounds morbid, but this is part of my story as well, which I can share a little later. But we begin with the end in mind. Stephen Covey's book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, chapter 2 is called "Begin with the End in Mind." Napoleon Hill, one of the greatest thought leaders of our time, would always talk about beginning with the end in mind. And so that's what we do, is we ask ourselves that sobering question: is if I were to die today and my wife was standing over my casket and giving a eulogy, what are the words she would write? And you're going to write those. What would she say today? Now, that is what she would say about the man that you are today. What would happen if you were 100% the man you felt called to be? That you showed up powerfully, not just at work, but at home. You were every bit the man that you knew you could be. And then, then she read that eulogy of that man. What would she say there? And that beginning with both ends in mind, and then because that gap, who we are and who we really feel called to be, within that gap lies our tension, our anxiety, our frustration. That's the stuff that keeps us up at night, man. But it's so intangible. So we get to the end, we visualize that, we paint a very clear picture on what do we want to be known for, right? Because that's a big question.
Mm-hmm.
What do you want to be known for? And a lot of people don't know the answer to that. And then we answer that question, and then we start working backwards, man.
Yeah, I want to talk about that. I want to talk about identifying that piece of us that's maybe getting missed. But before I do that, Mitch, I know you're a workout guy. I'm a workout guy. I like to get a good warm-up in before we get to the heavy lifting stuff. So I got a few questions for you to just get you warmed up and get you ready to go.
Yeah.
You ready for that?
Mm-hmm.
All right, here we go. What's the best one-word description of you?
Ambitious.
Oh, I like that. Would that always have been the word, you think?
Nope.
That's good. Ambitious. So that's an evolution for you.
Yep. 100%, man.
All right. What about this one? Favorite quote or a quote that just sticks with you, Mitchell?
Oh, time is the only currency we spend without knowing the remaining balance. We have no idea how much time we have left, Jerrod. I could have 60 minutes or 60 years. And so if I can live with that kind of awareness, man, it changes how I live in each moment.
Yeah, no, perfect. That's a really good one. What would be your theme song if your life had a theme song? So you get an entrance song right here. What would your song be?
Jeez. Dude, I have no idea, man. I don't know. I don't have an answer for that. I got to think about it.
Dude, I don't know. I'm getting a vibe from you. It might be like a classical, like up tempo, maybe a Braveheart-ish type song. Like,
Ooh,
you know what I mean? Just bringing that warrior forward for you.
Like an anthemic sort of battle cry.
Yeah, no words though, because we're reflecting only on our own words, but we got something to get us going.
I'm gonna say the Braveheart theme music. I don't know what it's called, but I'll choose that.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. All right, what's a favorite book or a book you find yourself going back to in your life?
Probably. Let me. If you're watching, or if you're listening on audio, then I'm looking at my bookshelf here. But probably there's a book called 10x. 10x is easier than 2x by Benjamin Hardy and Dan Sullivan. And I'm a big optimization kind of guy. And the whole book is about how to 10x your productivity, and not looking for just doing more, like 2xing everything, but how to actually change the entire game and to ask bigger questions. To actually not 2x but 10x. It's been transformational in how I run my business, how I run my life. So it's a good one.
Awesome. Yeah, I have to look into that one. All right, Mitchell, one more. You get dinner with one person. They could have passed on or still be with us. Who would you have dinner with, and what would you want to ask them?
Elvis Presley, man, probably.
I didn't see that one coming. What would you ask the king?
Well, I just think he's fascinating, man. And I'm a musician, and I've been a musician for years, performing, and all that. And I just think I would love to know. I mean, he had such a life of, growing up in this religious background, and then in the church, and then kind of the fame, and then the sort of the downfall and the challenges. I just think his life was wild, and I'd love to know, how did you, like, what was your inside life like? How did you handle all that? You know what I mean? Like, and also, how did you die? Did you actually die?
You'd solve that mystery too, man.
Yeah, man.
Oh, that's awesome. First responders, your strength, speed, and safety matter. That's why Veritas Athletic Performance delivers remote training built just for you. Led by Coach Matt Erdman, a 14-year law enforcement veteran and certified coach, our programs focus on movement, not just muscle, to boost performance and cut injury risk. Through the Train Heroic app, your training is personalized, monitored, and adapted wherever you are. Train smarter, serve stronger, and protect what matters most. Veritas Athletic Performance, your readiness is our mission. All right, Mitchell, you feeling warmed up, my friend? We got a little Braveheart theme in our heads. All right, I want to start with something in doing some preparation and research here. I saw a quote that you had shared that kind of kickstarted a lot of this for you, and that is, are you living a life worth imitating? That I think you said you heard at a funeral. So if you don't mind, share with us like where you were at in your life and what hearing that quote meant to you.
Yeah, man, so good. That was a pivotal point. For me, there were people often ask me, what was your turning point? And for me, there were two. Okay. Number one was a fight, and then the second one was a funeral. And the first one was the fight with my wife. And if you could picture with me, we were sitting on the living room couch, and it all hit the fan. We started fighting over money. That morphed into a fight about me not being fully present, and it kind of spiraled. And at this point, we had been married for about 3 years, and it was a tough 3 years, Jerrod. Like, it was hard. But this fight, this day, was our rock bottom. We fought all the time, but this one was different because we had sworn we'd never use the D word, divorce. This was the first day we used it. And deep down, I knew that if something didn't change, this would all be over, that I'd lose my wife forever. And to give you some context, I was just let go from a senior leadership position. And my career was everything to me, man. It was my calling. It was my identity. And that's the case for a lot of men, right? But I spiraled into depression. I gained 60 pounds. I was $100,000 in debt. I was medicating with drugs and alcohol, just trying to kind of just cope with everything, right? And on top of this all, now we were getting dangerously close to divorce. And the thing was, man, I was checked out, stressed out, burned out, and I didn't know, I couldn't understand it, because I was like, how is it that I'd seen success professionally, but yet I couldn't figure out my life personally, right? Why was it that I felt so powerful at work, but I felt powerless at home? I didn't even know how to talk to my own wife. And there was this sort of duality that was tearing me apart. And so to take it back even further, I came from a dysfunctional upbringing, I knew I wanted something different from my life, but, growing up, I had this dysfunctional, relations, family, and I had a non-existent relationship with my father. Alcoholism, drugs, crime, abuse were just littered throughout my family. And so I was caught in the middle of it all. And, what happened was that I didn't deal with those wounds. And those wounds, as I grew up, began to bleed out into my marriage. and I could feel myself getting pulled back into the trauma of my past. And when I would yell at my wife, man, I could hear my father's voice in mine. I could hear his words, and I hated it, but I couldn't stop it. I knew I was called to be, I knew I was called to more, to be a better man, but I just didn't know how. And maybe some of your listeners today can relate of what that feels like. But then the second moment for me came about 7 days later, and this is where you chimed into the story, and this was the funeral. Okay, I was invited to sing. I mentioned I was a musician at the funeral of this wealthy man. He was a philanthropist, and after hearing all of what this man had done and all that he, his accomplishments and accolades, he was wrapping up the funeral, and the minister asked the congregation. He said, "Are you living a life worthy of imitation?" And then he said, "If you were to die tomorrow, would you be proud of the legacy that you left?" And then Jerrod, I'll tell you what, man, I swear he asked, it was 2,000 people in the room, and he asked that question for me because as I was strapping on my guitar, getting ready to sing, I could barely choke out the lyrics of the last song because all I could think was, man, if this were my funeral today, nobody would be standing around my casket saying things like, "He inspired me to have an amazing marriage," or "He inspired me to get into shape," or "He inspired me to steward my finances." They probably would have said at that point, "He struggled," and then it was over. And at this funeral, people were telling stories of the man he was and the life that he lived, and that's what people do, right? They tell stories because that's all they have left. Incredible chapters of their life. And so for me, I just was determined, man. By the time I left that church and packed up, I would rewrite my story. Because up until that point, one chapter of my life was my childhood, and that was a sad story. The next chapter of my life was my marriage, and that was a story of struggle. And so right there and then I decided, man, I've got to take complete ownership, not just for me, but for my wife and my kids. And it sounds intense, but I knew that if I wanted something different, I needed to literally die to the man that I used to be in order to become the man, husband, father I knew I could be. It was a bold decision, right?
Yeah.
Because I knew that at the end of the day, if I wanted different results, I had to make different decisions. Otherwise, this is Einstein's definition of insanity, right? Expecting different results, but never doing anything differently, right?
Yeah.
So I made commitments to myself, man, and I surrounded myself with men who were living where I wanted to go, men who would be mentors for me, that my ceiling was their floor.
Yep.
Where I ended, they began. And these men surrounded me. They gave me the tools, the strategies to help me understand how to connect with my wife, how to get my finances in order, how to get clean and focused, how to lose the weight and reclaim my health. And they called me up, not just called me out. They celebrated my successes and they stood with me in my losses. And I tell you what, Jerrod, within 18 months, we paid off the $100,000 of debt, completely restored our marriage. I lost the 60 pounds, built a strong, lean body, and I was clean of substances and distractions. And so what happened then, man, was because, again, I'd always been in positions of leadership. All of a sudden, people started asking questions like, "Bro, what are you doing? Like,
Right.
what's going on with your body? Or how did you do all this stuff?" And so I started helping people. And because I could see that they were believing the same lies that I was believing, because I was chasing professional success, and my life was a personal mess, right? And so I realized that, like, I could have all the influence in the world, but if I was going to be sitting around the Christmas tree alone this year, what was the point?
Right.
If I didn't want to celebrate by myself with my wife in our home that we built, and I'm at an apartment that I rented, right? And so I started helping people in my life, just for free, just buddies of mine, helping them get closer to their wife or get out of debt or lose weight. And then one of my mentors challenged me and he said, "You need to start a podcast, man. Share your mission and share your principles with the world." And so that's when I launched the Dad Nation podcast. And then within about 8 months, it became a globally rated top 10% podcast. And then I had people reaching out from around North America saying, "Hey, would you be willing to coach? Would you be willing to help me?" And so I launched the Dad Nation coaching and consultation. And then I started helping men. And I love this quote from Ed Milet. He's passionate about this, but he says, "You are the most qualified to help the person you used to be." And that's all I did, Jerrod, is I just helped men who are a couple steps behind me, really, at the end of the day, man. And I've used the principles and the frameworks that I've created over the last 10 years to help men reclaim their home, their health, and their happiness. So that's my story.
Yeah, let me unwind a bit there and go back to that moment you're on stage and you got the guitar coming on, you're supposed to sing, but you feel like you're being talked to. Because I think that happens to a lot of us, right? There's messages, but we don't listen.
Yep.
Or we don't hear. So how did you balance it? Like, how did that become the moment you listened? Because would you say maybe before there might have been other messages that you didn't listen to?
Yeah, man. There were probably lots of times there was writing on the wall.
Mm-hmm.
But I had to learn a lot of lessons the hard way, dude. And for me, trauma leads to transformation usually. And for me, I had to get to a point, I'm not coming at this with an ego and preaching at people, your listeners. I'm coming at this with humility to say, I didn't have the I think emotional intelligence. I didn't have the wisdom, the foresight to see what was going on around me. And I had to wait till my life almost imploded in order to make the change. And for me, it was just a rock bottom. It's like now or never, man.
Yeah.
Do you literally want to throw away everything? Do you want to end up being an alcoholic just like your father and his father and his father? Do you want your son to grow up to become an alcoholic? Do you want to raise him in poverty? Well, you know what I mean? Do you want to lose your wife this year? And there was this moment of clarity, and for me, yeah, I'd like to say that I had the wisdom to change my ways earlier, but no, man, my life was completely on fire and there was no other option. Lose everything or do something different and take ownership. Right? Because that was the thing. One of my mentors had asked me, because even when I started talking to them, I still had ego. I'd be like, well, we're not getting along, but we'll figure it out. Or, yeah, we're in debt, but, we'll figure it out. And he's like, how's that working for you? Mm-hmm. You figuring it out, doing it on your own. How's that going? And he gently just reminded me that he was trying to say, hey, it's not.
Yeah.
Be honest with yourself. And for me, when I was faced when I laid my pride aside and my ego down and I was truly honest, well, it wasn't working for me, clearly, but I had to see that for myself.
And I love what you said there. And I think sometimes that's where we get caught up, especially in today's society, is that you didn't have the wisdom, but you took ownership, which created action, right? Mm-hmm. Sometimes I think with so much information in our hands and we can find facts on anything, we know we need to make changes. We know we want different, but we're paralyzed by analyzing data. Or if I get this next this next certification, qualification, whatever, that thing's going to be different. And a lot of times it's not. It just takes you taking action. Yeah.
Well, here's the thing. We don't need more information. We need implementation.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we need. Tony Robbins says, he said a little while ago, we are a generation that's drowning in information, but starving for wisdom. And man, I was like, dang, that's so true. We are inundated, obliterated with information. I think I read a statistic the other day. We take in today through social media and through our devices, we take in the equivalent of 147 newspapers per day just in our devices. So we are bombarded with information. That's not the problem, is implementation. Right? Can you take all the knowledge of the universe with ChatGPT, artificial intelligence, that actually take one thing and play the book, right? Mm-hmm. Play it out. Just do it. But that's the problem, right? We're like, oh, well, we just need to learn this new strategy. We just need to learn this new tactic. We just need to buy this new course. We just need to listen to this new podcast. Shiny object, shiny object, shiny object, right?
Yep.
So that's been my experience. So I tell guys all the time, I'm like, I don't care. I don't care if it's me, if you hire me or you get a part of my communities or whatever, or anyone else. Just connect with someone that you trust that has been successful and follow them and listen to one voice and implement that playbook and run it and run it and run it until you see the results you want. Because that's the thing, man. It's paralysis by analysis, right? So,
yeah, and we have this idea that every decision we make is such a grand decision, right? It's such a monumental. Most of your decisions aren't, dude. Like, really, most of them are Small decisions that create momentum that build you to bigger places. But when we don't want to make that decision because we're just sitting idly by, you're not getting any momentum. And that's one of the things I share with my people is let's get momentum going. Because even if you fall flat on your face and make a mistake and fail, you're moving in a direction. Now you can pivot.
Mm-hmm.
Now you have energy.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're just sitting on the sidelines, nothing's going to be different.
Yeah. Well, it's, there's a model for this called the confidence competence loop. Have you ever heard of it before?
Yep, for sure.
Yeah. Well, and that's, really what we need to do is we need to start that loop and if your listeners haven't heard of it, it's essentially this is the problem, right? Is we lose self-confidence because we break promises to ourselves. And what happens is we all think that, let's say for example, fitness. I tell myself, I'm going to get up at 5:30 and I'm going to be at the gym for 6. And then, 5:30 comes along, we turn off the alarm and we think, wow, it's not like I even told anybody I'm doing this.
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter. But you know what? It doesn't matter if anyone else knows. Your mind knows, and your mind begins to say things, like your inner story starts to say things like, why should anyone else trust you if you can't trust yourself? If you can't follow through on your own promises, no one else should be able to trust you. And you lose rapport with yourself, and that's why we say we lose self-confidence. And so the best way to get momentum is to make some small promises and to start keeping them, because then what happens is, James Clear says you're casting votes to the person you want to become, right? And so you get that, you make that commitment, you follow through, and then you get some competence in this new thing that you're trying to do. Maybe it's going to the gym, maybe it's running a business, maybe it's emotional, intelligence, whatever. All of a sudden now you're a little bit more competent, which then in turn makes you a little bit more confident to take another step. And then after you take the step again, you have greater competence. And so the cycle begins. And so what I tell people all the time is stop making such big goals, right? Because what happens is you make some ridiculous goal because of some jacked guy you see on Instagram or some multi-millionaire, and you're like, well, I'm going to do this crazy thing. And this person has years of discipline that they've forged, you can't do that. Do something that's sustainable for you.
Right.
No joke, man. Some of my clients, if it's in fitness, I'm like, all I want you to do is stop drinking soda. That's it. Or we're going to go to the gym and we're going to do one exercise and then we're going to leave. That's it. We may not even go into the gym. And then the next week we're going to do 2 exercises and then we're going to come home. They're like, what? That's ridiculous. I'm like, well, no. You have to start taking small changes, making small promises to yourself that you can keep. Because what happens is if you make some big promise and you don't follow through, then that's like 1 step forward, 2 steps back.
Yeah.
Because then you're actually then reaffirming that narrative that's already going on in your head that you're not trustworthy.
Yep.
So if you're, and I say this and get into trouble all the time, doesn't make for motivational content, but I say, if you're not meeting your goals, lower them.
Yeah.
Right? Lower them until you can meet them and get that movement, get that motion started.
Yeah, 100%. And it's funny because we ran a gym in northern Colorado for years, and we get people to come in and they do their first free class or whatever, and at the end they'd be like, oh, that was the hardest part I got in here, right? And I'd be like, no. The next class you show up before is the hardest part, because the first one you didn't even know what you're getting into. Now you know what you're getting into. So now you're going to go home and be sore, tired, fatigued, whatever. Now, if you can show up the second time, that's the hardest class. And then after that, they're all going to get easier because now we've created a pattern of showing up for ourselves.
100%.
Right. And I used to always just laugh. I was like, no, the first was fairly easy because you're excited. You saw the ad, you got the promo code, you showed up. The second one, you're like, oh, shit, this is actually hard work. That's the tough one.
Yeah. When you're not running on dopamine, and you're just like, oh, here we go again.
Right. But that's the grind in your life, right? Like if I only show up on the big days, well, how many in your life are there really compared to how many days are the small decisions impacting where everything goes? And to find enjoyment in that, right? To find enjoyment in the actual work and the process of becoming who we want to be.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing. I think this is a great fallacy that we fall in, that we believe, especially as men. David Data calls it the great masculine error. He says, that one day we all sort of believe that we fall for this false narrative that one day it's going to be easy. One day we're going to fully understand our partners. One day, it's going to be easy to go to the gym, or one day we're going to be millionaires and we're going to have all this passive income and we won't have to work for it. And it's like we live in this perpetual state of reaching for easy. And the reality is life isn't easy. It's hard. And perhaps that's the point, because whether whether having a lot of friends is hard, right? Having no friends is hard. Being overweight is hard. Being in great shape is hard. Working for someone else is hard. Being an entrepreneur is hard, right? Having a great marriage is hard. Being divorced or getting a divorce or walking through a divorce is hard, right? Like there is no scenario where it's easy. And so what we need to do is choose the pain that we're willing to suffer for and go for it. But as long as we're looking for easy and chasing it, we'll never be content. And so I tell people all the time, if you listen to my podcast or, over here, some of the things I say, it's all, it's things like, hey, you want contentment? You want peace? Well, the sooner you can accept this narrative, that's when you're going to be content. That's when you're going to be at peace. When you stop looking for easy around every corner, and you realize that it's hard. And that's actually the point, especially for us as men, because we were built for challenge. We were built to build, to conquer, to overcome. We were literally designed for adversity. And I think that's half the reason why we struggle so much and so many people are anxious, because they're constantly through this facade of thinking that it's supposed to be easy. And you blend that with a squeeze of entitlement, you got a pretty potent cocktail for frustration and anxiety. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, 100%. And I was just picturing as you said that, right? Like, it's hard to do all the things we want to obtain. So let's find the joy in doing hard stuff, right? Like, I was just sharing this with my kids the other day. It's like life is supposed to be hard. You're supposed to do hard stuff. If every day was easy, what's the value in that? What would you have learned? Where would you have grown? Mm-hmm. So when you're faced with the opportunity to do something that's hard, like take a moment and go, okay, this is my test for today. Let's see how I respond.
Yeah. And that's where you can find the pride and the joy and the confidence and the contentment, of like knowing you did great work and you worked your butt off, and it's incredible. I love this concept. It's called The Gap and the Gain, and it's another book written actually by Dan Sullivan and Benjamin Hardy. But essentially, the whole concept of the book is there's two ways that we can think in the gap or the gain. And so the gap is what happens when we get stuck comparing our life to some ideal in the future that's unmeasured, that's not tangible. We don't even know what that is. And it's like we're striving for the horizon, but it's always moving. Like, Jerrod, if me and you were in the middle of the ocean and we look to the horizon and we're in a rowboat, and I'm like, man, if we just paddle fast enough to get to the horizon, then we'll make it. Well, the problem is with the horizon, as fast as you paddle, the faster it gets away from you. Right. And so what happens is you're just anxious and you're frustrated and you're constantly measuring yourself to some moving target, versus the gain, which requires us to look backward and say, and to measure our results from where we've come from, what we've accomplished. Because here's the thing, Jerrod, like either way, we're going to get to the future, believe it or not. But what version of you do you want to be there? One who's been living in the gap and is striving and stressed and constantly stuck in this culture of comparison, or someone who's been living in the gain, who's looking 2 or 3 steps back and celebrating their hard work and celebrating the development and where they've come from. That version of me, that's who I want to get to the future. And that's what we need to do when we talk about accepting the hard things and doing hard work. And it's like, man, am I better today than I was a week ago? Yeah. Do I know more today than I did a week ago? Yes. But if I look forward, I get caught in the gap trap and I start comparing myself. And it may be a future version of me. It also might be my neighbor. It might be my in-laws. It might be somebody on Instagram. It's like, no. I will not fall into the gap trap. I will choose to live in the gain and look back at where I've come from and celebrate all that. And that's what helps me find peace and contentment in the moment and helps me continue to do the work, right?
So, Mitchell, let me ask you a question about that because I think that's an interesting concept. How did you balance looking back and seeing where you had been, what you had been through, but also giving yourself permission to break that cycle and create something new? Because I find a lot of times people look back and they see it and they know it, but the narrative they tell themselves is not one of overcoming, but this is who I have to be. So how did you flip it to where you're like, okay, there's power in my past story, but I'm able to redefine who I want to become?
Yeah, that's so good. You know what? If you're okay with this, I'll actually give you a framework that I use with my one-to-one clients on how to do exactly what you're talking about.
Sure.
Is that okay with you?
Yeah, yeah.
It'll be real quick. Because basically what happens is we, as children, we allow well, we can have no control over it, but our environment shapes our attitude, right? So how we're raised shapes how we see the world and all those different things, what our definitions of love and all that. But we make the mistake of growing up to be adults and still thinking that our environment shapes our attitude. But what we need to understand is we can flip the script and we can allow our attitude to shape our environment, to say, no, 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 no. We are going to change how we present, how we show up, and our attitude, both physically and mentally, to shape the rooms we get in, to shape the relationships we're in, right? And so what we need to do is reframe the past to serve us. And actually, there's one framework called the author's advantage that I use, and that's essentially flipping the script, because a lot of us think life goes past, present, future. But what we need to do is turn that around, and we actually start with the future. Remember, I said in the beginning of the show, beginning with the end in mind, get a very clear picture of who we want to be, the life we want to live, what do we want to be known for? And then we say, okay, well, in order to be at that place, what do I have to do in the present tense to be there, right? And then so we really create a plan and strategies around how to live to be that person. And then the last step is actually the past. And we begin to take ownership and reframe the past and pull it into alignment with where we want to go and give it a new meaning, because your past gets to mean whatever meaning you want to give it. You understand what I mean?
Yep.
And so we all have these narratives running through our heads, like, I'm not smart enough to fill in the blank, or it's too late to try something new, or if I do this, then this is what's going to happen, or I don't have enough time or resources, or the last one, which I fell for a lot, was if I do this, people will judge me. And that's the fear of failure, right? And so I created a framework around this called the clear thinking process. And so this is how we extract the self-limiting lies from our past and help basically cancel out the self-sabotager and stop sort of sabotaging our life. And at the process, it's 5 steps, CLEAR. Okay, so the first step is to call out the lie, right? So this is the part where we say, you could write the statement, the story I'm telling myself about blank is, now you might be saying, I'm just an angry man, or I'm a bad dad, or that I'm too far gone, or I missed the moment, or I don't deserve that kind of income, whatever it is. And I want you to go into as much detail as possible. What is the lie that you're believing, right? Number 1. Number 2, L stands for locate the source. Okay. This is where we write out a phrase, something like, the people or situations that have started this or reinforced this narrative are. Now, maybe this came from a parent or a friend or a high school bully or a colleague, but it's important that you name it, because when you name the source, you can break its power. Okay. So you call out the lie, locate the source. Now, the third step is to evaluate the cost. And this is my favorite step. And this is where you ask yourself, what has living by this lie cost me? Has it cost me my peace, my confidence, my marriage? And you might write a phrase, the results I'm getting from telling myself this lie is, and you answer, right? Now, it's important we feel the weight of that, but not so much to shame us, but to give us leverage to change it. And the fourth step is affirm the truth. And this is actually where we begin to flip that script. Okay, so now we're going to write a statement that's true about who we are, because we've called out the lie, right? And so we're going to ask ourselves, what else could be as true, if not more true, than that story that I was telling myself? Right now, so for example, for me, I was always told, you're not the smart one in the family. That's your older sister. I was told you're going to be an alcoholic like your dad, right? And so my affirming the truth statement was, I am an intellectual. I'm clear-minded. I'm focused, and I have much to offer this world and those I love. Notice that it was present tense, and there was certainty-based language. I didn't say, I hope to be an intellectual.
Yeah.
I want to be focused one day. I sure hope I'm clean, you know? And so you affirm the truth. And the last step, which is where we get real tactical, is R, reinforce with action, right? So now we don't just say it. This is where we live it. And this is where we start this confidence loop, right? What's one action that you can take today to prove that new belief to yourself, right? So for me, in the context of, I'm not an intellectual, well, I'm going to start reading books to prove to myself,
Yep.
And the ultimate step of reinforcing that belief with action was launching the podcast. Because surely if I'm not an intellectual, then I got nothing to offer to the world. And so launching that, or the coaching practice, was like, well, if I can do this, then I can't believe that old lie. You know what I mean? And so that 5-step process, locate the source, call out the lie, locate the source, evaluate the cost, affirm the truth, and reinforce with action, is that 5-step process that you can go through to extract those lies and stop believing them, and pull your past into alignment with your future and where you want to go. And I love this phrase from, and I'll just wrap it up with saying this. There's a quote from Carl Jung, and he says, and this is exactly what we do. He says, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Right? And that's what we do. We don't recognize the unconscious narratives, and it just controls our life, and we call it fate. It's like, no, that doesn't have to be your destiny.
No,
right?
Dude, so powerful, man. And what I love, and I think this is where a lot of people kind of drop the ball when they're trying to help guide others, is you call it locate the source. I'll talk about who is the voice. Like when you hear that negative self-talk, who do you hear? Because you're right. A lot of times it's a parent, it was a coach, a teacher. Sometimes it's just you.
Yep.
Right. And when we hear that voice, we take our power back.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Like it's not like, like I always share, like the 6th grade music teacher doesn't get to tell me I can never be good at music anymore.
Yeah.
Because I address him. Right. But if I never do that, if I just hear, oh, I'm not good at music. I'm not good at music. You're never going to be good at music. But I don't put that ownership there. It's hard to move past it.
Yeah. Well, actually, it's a funny story. Now that we're here, you mentioned music. So when I was 16 in high school, I signed up for a choir class, right? Just took a leap of faith. And my choir conductor pulled me out of the class after the second class. I'll never forget it. He pulled me out. And he's like, hey, man, you can't sing. And he said, I'll never forget. He said, I have no use for you. And then he was like, I think you should sign up for gym or computer sciences or whatever. And so I have no idea why he said that. But I'll tell you what, Jerrod, I grew up, went to college believing that I couldn't sing, studied guitar, and then until I dated a girl who was singing in the vocal, she was doing a vocal degree. And then she got wind, and then a new conductor in the school that I was studying in said, hey, I'll give you free lessons if you would be willing to just consider singing in this group. Because you can. I don't know what you're talking about. And it took this psychological step of this new conductor to speak this truth into my life. Bro, I ended up leaving guitar as a major and started studying. I did a double year of vocals. I did classical vocal performance, and I ended up graduating with a degree in classical vocal performance, singing in French and German and Italian, opera, you name it. I got a job leading the music department in one of the largest churches in Canada. Literally was a professional vocalist, but I was told when I was 16 that I couldn't sing. And so when I talk about, well, I'm ambitious,
yeah,
that's what I'm talking about. But someone, just one word can plant the seed and send you on a trajectory, right? But you have the choice to make. Will you stay on that trajectory or will you course correct?
Dude, I love that so much because there's so much power in that. And I think that's a good thing for us to reflect on too, right? Like we've talked a lot this episode about working on ourselves, which is, I can't help anybody else till I start helping myself. I firmly believe that. But also is that ripple effect I like to call, like you said in earlier, right? You start working on yourself, other people see it. And when they come to you, what words are you going to give them? Are you going to tell them they can't do something? Or are you going to be the words of encouraging?
Yeah.
Right? Because I like to challenge myself with this, right? Like your life story is being written today, Mitchell. My life story is being written today. So now for this day, we're each characters in each other's stories. How are we going to show up in that movie, right? How do we show up in that book?
Yeah, it's powerful.
And if somebody trusts you enough to come to you, what words do you want to leave them with? Right? Because imagine that second teacher would have also told you you had no talent. And so I encourage our community, our listeners out there, when you have that conversation today, be the second teacher that encouraged Mitchell to believe in himself, right? Because maybe you wouldn't have been good at singing. But if you started out, maybe you would have found a new path. Like nobody gets to determine what we're good at and what we're not good at unless we choose to believe words. We choose to believe things without even giving it a shot. And
Well, I think words are incredibly powerful. Like I'm a person of faith, and so in the Bible, in the book of Proverbs, it says the power of life and death are in the tongue, meaning like you have the ability to speak life or death every single time you speak, whether it's you're speaking to yourself or you're speaking to others. And I mean, these words were written over 2,000 years ago, and so this is not a new thing. I mean, how you use your words can change the trajectory of your life or the life of others. And so you carry a lot of power in your tongue. And so that's why Mama always said, watch your mouth, right?
Right.
Huge.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And in today's world where we get to voice a lot of things, maybe social media, whatever, we also, I would challenge our community to make sure we're aware of those words, right? What are we posting out there? What are we sharing? Do those things inspire people to believe? Do they help people move forward in life? Or are we, quite honestly, just part of the problem of creating hate and discontent and comparison, which doesn't serve any of us? Let me ask you this, Mitchell. What's your go-to strategy when a dad says to you, I don't have time?
Yeah, I say you're not making time. Right? I don't care who you are.
Yeah.
Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, Jerrod, Mitchell. We all have the same 24 hours. We all got the same 60 minutes in an hour. Last time I checked, you can't get 65 minutes in an hour. You can't squeeze 75. There's only 60.
Yeah.
Right? And so your calendar reflects your priorities. Show me a man's calendar and I'll tell you what his priorities are. That's it. And so I don't buy that excuse. You don't have time. I've coached men who have multiple companies, 5 kids, who train 4 times a week.
Yeah.
Right? Now, do they have small margins? Probably. But then I've also talked to guys who have a half-time job, no kids, not married, and don't have time to work out. Excuse me?
Yeah.
So it's not about if you have enough time, it's have you made the time. I get up at 5 o'clock every morning. My son gets up at 7. Now, I'm not saying that, ooh, look at me. I'm just saying if I don't create that time, there will be no time for me.
Right.
And if I want to be a good model for him, if I want to love my wife, and if I want to be stable, if I want to give them the life that I believe I need to do, I need to pour into myself first. I got to fill my bucket because Lord knows the rest of the day I'm pouring out to everybody else, my clients, listeners, my family, all that stuff. And so I need to create that time so that I have something left. One of the most sobering moments I've ever had in my marriage, my wife said to me, she said, you go to work and you give everyone else the Mitch buffet and you come home and you give me the scraps.
Yeah.
The crumbs on the table. And I was like, I actually got that all backwards. And so I made up my mind that I would never expect myself to pour from an empty bucket, you know. And so you make the time for what matters most, and that's why we need to get into alignment with what does matter the most. Because in my experience, almost every single one of my clients, when I ask them the questions, "What do you want?" they don't know. Like, these are high performing men,
Mm-hmm.
but they've spent their whole life building the business, building the empire, building their reputation or their accolades. And so when we get down to it, they usually say, well, I want my kids to love me.
Mm.
I want to have a healthy marriage. I want to have, all those, I want to be healthy. Okay, that's great. But why is it that your words say that, but your actions are saying everything else? Because you're working 16 hours a day, because you're drinking, like every second night, you're pounding, 8, 9,
Yeah.
10 beers, or whatever, right?
Yep.
Your actions are actually sabotaging what you truly want. And so when we connect, and this is why I talk about this idea of why power versus your willpower. And when you can connect with your why and what's most important to you, that's going to be way stronger than your will.
Yep.
So, for example, if I talk to somebody and I say, what do you want to, in a fitness context, what do you want? They say, well, I want a 6-pack. Okay, well, that's great. But is that like your long-term goal? And when we really get down to it, they say, I want to be a healthy dad. I want to walk my daughter down the aisle one day. I want to be able to throw my grandkids around.
Yep.
Okay, well, that's deep.
Yep.
And let's anchor to that, right? So anyways, just a little point to add on to what you're saying there.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. Mitchell, thank you so much for coming on the show this week. Where can our audience connect with you and become part of your movement and sharing your journey?
Yeah, man. I do 3 things. I keep it real simple. I do content, courses, coaching. 3 C's. That's it. The content's the Dad Nation podcast. You can search that anyway. If you just search Dad Nation, you'll see my face plastered around, or Instagram, whatever. The courses, I have something called the High Performance Husband that I'm about to release, and that is essentially everything that I offer my one-to-one clients in a self-guided digital program. And then obviously the coaching. So whether you want to be in a community of men that I call the Dad Nation Coalition, or you want to do one-to-one for the right guy, I got a bit of a back pocket offer, but would love to connect with you. If there's a fire in your belly now while you're listening to this, reach out, and whether it's just connecting over Instagram or through the podcast, great. But if you're the kind of guy who want to take action and, make a change today, reclaim the home, the health, the happiness, like we talked about, then happy to jump on a call and see what that looks like.
Awesome. Mitchell, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for the courage to hear that message, make the changes, and create the life you deserved, your family deserved, and for sharing that story so others can do the same.
Yeah, you're welcome. Actually, Jerrod, you know what? I got a free gift that I'd love to give your listeners today, if you're okay with that.
For sure.
Yeah, it's just called the Connection Code. And so a lot of my work is with men who are feeling disconnected in their relationships. And we know that 80% of the time divorces are initiated in the United States today. It's because the wife feels emotionally disconnected from their husband. And so we know that men, we really struggle with this. And so this simply is just a list of 50 questions that are strategically designed to spark the fun and bring the fire back, and allow you to connect with your partner. When she says, I feel like I'm married to a robot, or we don't talk like we used to, those kinds of things. This can help you. If you go to dadnationco.com/code, or I could just give you the link and you hit in the show notes below. Totally free. And my clients have been using it, and it's just been absolutely incredible for them and their relationships. So
awesome. Mitchell, thank you so much, my friend, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, brother. It was a pleasure to be on the show with you.
And remember, team, life is far too short to live any other way than on purpose. We will see you all again next week.